Virgil, a Latin poet, wrote his epic in the last few decades before Christ. In this story, Aeneas, the hero, runs away from the smoking ashes of Troy, carrying the burden of his people's existence with him. His quest takes him to Italy, where fate says that his ancestors will one day build the foundations of a great new city. Aeneas stops in Carthage along the way and wins the love of its queen, Dido. Their connection is strong, but it will not last. He leaves her to finish his duty because fate has tied them together. Dido kills herself on a pyre because she is so sad and angry at Aeneas and his family. She curses them with perpetual enmity. In her last words, she tells the Tyrians to always be hostile towards the descendants of Troy. She does not want any friends or treaties. She just wants to fight all the time. Virgil's action sets off an old feud that would last for generations between Rome and Carthage. This hatred, which came from myths and was made worse by ambition, turned into the Punic Wars. The first of these wars put the young Roman Republic to the test as it fought its first big battle outside of Italy against the strong fleets and soldiers of Carthage. In the early years of the 3rd century before Christ, Rome beat King Pyrrhus of Epirus and took control of southern Italy and the Greek-founded cities there. During that war, Rome clashed with Carthage, a formidable maritime kingdom that had dominion over North Africa, Spain, Sardinia, and Corsica. At that time, Carthage also had a strong grasp on Sicily, an island that was very rich and well placed in the Mediterranean. However, in just 10 years, the island would spark the first open battle between the two former friends, leading to a war that would last over decades and across oceans. After Agathocles, the tyrant of Syracuse, died in the late 4th century before Christ, the roots of this struggle were planted. His mercenaries, many of whom were Italian, took over the city of Messana when he lost his job. They killed or expelled the men, made the women and children slaves, and called themselves the Mamertines, sons of Mars. For years, they ruled with fear until Hieron, the new king of Syracuse, assembled a citizen militia and marched against them. He won a huge victory at the Battle of the Longanus River. The Mamertines ran back to Messana, where Hieron lay siege and pushed them to the edge of annihilation. The Mamertines needed help to stay alive, so they looked for allies. There was a big split among them. Some wanted to join forces with Carthage, the great naval power of the Western Seas, while others wanted to join forces with Rome, the burgeoning land power over the strait. Their choice would lead to war between the two empires. The Roman Senate heard the Mamertines' plea. There were many different opinions in the room. Some people said that involvement was risky, while others said that letting Carthage take Messana would put Italy itself in danger. The argument culminated with the popular assembly, where most people wanted to join forces with the Mamertines. Rome moved quickly. A consul named Claudius led 20,000 men to Sicily, but a legate with the same name got there before. He was surprised to find that Carthaginian troops and ships were already in Messana. The Mamertines, in a state of desperation, had asked both Rome and Carthage for help. The Punics were the first to respond. Claudius tried to change the balance by inviting the Carthaginian admiral Hanno to a meeting under the pretense of negotiations. Instead, he took him hostage and said he would let him go if the citadel gave up. The Mamertines left their former guardians and joined Rome when Carthaginian power collapsed. The Carthaginians were angry and sent a new army led by a man named Hanno, who joined forces with King Hieron of Syracuse. The Punic army was closing in on Messana from the north, and Syracusan forces were pushing in from the south. The Romans were holding on to the city's citadel. The standoff ended when the main Roman army, led by Consul Claudius, finally got there. After trying to mediate and failing, his legions went to war. They attacked the Syracusan forces first, pushing them back with well-planned infantry attacks. Then they turned north to face the Carthaginian forces in a test of strength. The Carthaginian army quickly lost in open warfare, which let the Roman troops loot the land and march on Syracuse. But the walls of the city were strong, and the siege went on into the next year. Disease, notably malaria, hit the Roman camp harder than enemy spears. After Consul Appius Claudius's mandate was over, new leaders came to Sicily: Ottacilius Crassus and Manius Valerius Messala. The new consuls sent 16,000 soldiers and 1,200 horse to help the tired army. The Romans pulled back towards Messana, with King Hieron of Syracuse's troops close behind them. But Hieron was worried that Roman and Syracusan scouts in the field often acted like friends instead of enemies. He chose to be practical instead of resisting, since he could tell that his people were more devoted to Rome. Syracuse changed sides and made a long alliance with the Republic, promising to pay homage. The Roman consuls turned on Hanno, the commander of Carthage, when they had secured their southern flank. Roman foot soldiers broke up his army at the Battle of Himera. This show of strength made dozens of Sicilian cities that had earlier been loyal to Carthage join Rome, which gave the Republic a huge boost in power. The first Roman campaigns changed Sicily. Rome took over the northeast of the island, while Carthage's hold shrank to the western half. But Carthage did not give in. In the year 262 before Christ, they put Hannibal Gisco in charge and, as always, relied on mercenaries and foreign friends for their might. Hannibal Gisco worked to make Carthage stronger after they lost at Himera. He hired soldiers from Africa, Spain, Gaul, and Liguria, and by the time he got to Agrigentum on Sicily's southern coast, he had 50,000 warriors. He stored weapons and food behind strong walls, aiming to draw the Romans into a big battle. The Roman Senate took up the challenge and sent consuls Lucius Postumius and Quintus Mamilius with only 2 legions, sure that they would win easily. They made their army even weaker by sending out big groups to get food. Gisco saw an opening and sent a group of soldiers to attack the Roman camp, which was short on men. But the Roman guards held on, giving their lives one by one. Their desperate fight gave the foragers time to get back quickly and stop the Carthaginian attack. Gisco stopped making big attacks after the setback and instead used harassing fire and missile bombardments on the enemy's defenses. The Romans acted with discipline. They built 2 fortified camps connected by trenches and ramparts. One line faced Agrigentum to stop attacks from the front, and the second line protected against attacks from the back. The nearby town of Herbesus made sure that supply routes were safe, which meant that the extended siege would have consistent supplies. The impasse lasted for 5 long months, but Agrigentum was running out of food. Gisco asked for more troops since he was hungry. Carthage sent General Hanno with a new army, 6,000 fast Numidian horsemen and 50 war elephants in response. Hanno set up his stronghold in Heraclea and quickly took Herbesus. The Romans quickly saw they were stuck. Hanno's army cut off the supply lines, and Gisco's garrison pushed from behind, so the besiegers became the besieged. Their camps were full of hunger and disease. Knowing they could not hold out, the consuls got their legions ready for war, intending to break through Hanno's lines. Hanno carefully set up his troops. Heavy infantry in the front line, reserves and elephants behind, and fast Numidian cavalry on all sides. The Romans probably set up in their usual 3-line manipular formation, with cavalry on the sides to meet the Punic horsemen. However, there is not as much information about this. The Romans rapidly realized how skilled the Numidians were when the cavalry fought. Agile riders threw javelins with deadly accuracy, killing Roman horsemen and then scattering the survivors. But in the middle, the Roman infantry held their ground and kept pushing at Hanno's front line with steady force. When the Carthaginian soldiers started to falter, a smaller group of Romans attacked from behind, throwing the Punic line into disarray. Elephants got scared and stomped on their own soldiers. 30 animals died in the battle, and the Romans took 11 of them prisoner. Hanno ordered a retreat back to Heraclea to preserve his troops because he was afraid of ultimate. The Romans were free to fight Agrigentum itself once they beat Hanno. But Hannibal Gisco would not wait to be caught. On a cold winter night, his troops quietly filled Roman trenches with straw, climbed the walls, and got past the guards. The city was still there by daylight, but its garrison was gone. Some Roman units chased the runaways, but they were quickly summoned back. Now it was time to do the most important thing: attack Agrigentum. Rome had taken over a major Sicilian city for the first time in the First Punic War. This was a big turning point in the war, both symbolically and strategically. Agrigentum was defenseless after Hannibal Gisco's flight. The people gave up right away, but the Romans did not show much mercy. The city was robbed of its riches, and 25,000 people were taken as slaves. It was a terrible reminder of how strict Rome was in war. The Battle of Agrigentum was the first big ground battle of the war. The result changed the balance. Carthaginian troops retreated to the west, and several Sicilian cities promised to be loyal to Rome. But Carthage's fleet was still a threat, plundering coasts and luring some allies to switch sides. At this point, Rome had reached its first goals: preserving the Mamertines, making Syracuse a strong ally, and getting rid of Carthaginian power near the Italian mainland. But the Senate now wanted something even bigger: control of all of Sicily. To do this, Rome had to take the conflict beyond ground battles. The fight came to a standstill in the years that followed. Rome's disciplined soldiers ruled the land, while Carthage's strong navy ruled the sea. Both sides could have invaded the other's heartland, but they were missing the last piece. Rome did not have a navy, and Carthage did not have a powerful army. Rome, on the other hand, was not completely new to sailing. Duumviri navales were magistrates in charge of small fleets of triremes that patrolled the shore to protect it from pirates and other threats. But there were not enough of these ships, and they were not heavy enough to fight Carthage's powerful quinquiremes, which had 5 banks of oars. The Republic required ships that were just as good as Carthage's, but how could they get the skills? Fortune stepped in. A Carthaginian quinquireme crashed on the shore of Calabria. This one ship gave Rome both a model and a challenge, which led to the quick building of a navy that would change the direction of the war. Roman engineers made their own quinquiremes based on the wrecked Carthaginian ship. Polybius says that in less than 2 months, Rome and its Italian allies sent out 100 of these warships and 20 triremes, each with 12,000 marines and 30,000 rowers. Training started before the ships were even ready. Wooden scaffolds were built on the beaches to look like the frames of the ships. The Chiliustes told the trainee rowers how to move their oars in time with each other, and they sat in rows. Discipline took the place of experience, creating order where talent was missing. The Romans could not learn how to do the complicated maneuvers needed for ramming, which was the main tactic in naval warfare. Instead, they changed to absorb the force and produced a new weapon, the corvus, a boarding bridge with a metal spike. Once it was lowered, it held opposing ships in place so that marines could board. This technology turned fighting at sea into fighting on land. Roman soldiers who were accustomed to fight up close could now win at sea. When Consul Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio commanded 17 ships to take the Lipari Islands, that was their first test. But his lack of experience cost him a lot. Carthaginian troops blocked the harbor, making him give up. Then Consul Gaius Duilius took over, as he was more stable. When he heard that the Carthaginians were raiding the Italian shore, he sailed to stop them. Hannibal Gisco led 130 warships against Duilius's fleet of 100. He was sure that his experience and numbers would be enough to defeat the fledgling Roman navy. Hanno's squadron fought the Roman Triarian and started to win. At the same time, the northern wing of the Carthaginian army pushed the third Roman squadron hard, making it move towards the coast. Roman ships that had been cut loose from their tows drifted helplessly in the middle of 3 different naval engagements. Some of the Carthaginian ships used a different strategy. They charged sideways to break Roman oars. The corvée may turn and drop down on them with the same ferocity. In the middle of the turmoil, Romans occasionally jumped right over without waiting for the bridges. 50 Carthaginian warships were either seized or sunk, so Gisco had to flee with the rest. The Roman victory at Mylae gave their legions in Sicily more confidence, and they pushed further into regions held by the Carthaginians. The Republic also sent ships across the sea at the same time. The navy attacked Sardinia and Corsica under the command of Consul Lucius Cornelius Scipio. Sardinia held strong, but Roman troops took over Corsica's forts. Scipio gave the next consul command when he got back to Rome in triumph. Not long later, Sulpicius fought Hannibal Gisco's navy off Sardinia. The Romans surrounded the Carthaginians while they were at anchor and sank most of their ships. Gisco's men were so angry at losing that they mutinied, and he was killed by crucifixion, a horrible Carthaginian ritual. Rome's gains came at a cost because they had to spread their troops out, which left gaps in Sicily. Carthage took the chance. Hamilcar, the new leader, set up an ambush for the Romans who were fleeing at Himera and killed many. He subsequently destroyed the city of Eryx, which was allied with Rome, and enslaved its people. He also strengthened his position at the nearby stronghold of Dranium. In response, a Roman consul moved against Panormus, but Hamilcar had made its defenses stronger. The Carthaginians stood their position and refused to fight in a pitched combat. Instead, the Romans took out their anger on lesser places, such as Hippana and Mytistratum, where they burned and killed the people or made them slaves. The Romans were stuck in a small pass as they marched south towards Camarina. A Carthaginian group attacked the column, and only the death of 2 or 3 maniples led by a tribune let the others get away. Their bravery was remembered when Camarina fell to the legions soon after. A new leader came in the next year. Consul Gaius Atilius Regulus assumed office in 257 before Christ. He landed at Tyndaris and immediately looked for a fight, pushing Rome's progress forward in both Sicily and at sea, where the fight for control of the Mediterranean was far from ended. Consul Regulus saw a Carthaginian squadron sailing haphazardly from the top of Tyndaris. They were not in a tight formation. He saw a chance and ran out with just 10 quinqueremes, but the Carthaginians soon turned around, surrounded the little Roman army, and broke it apart. The consul's flagship was the only ship that got away. Regulus's squadron was already damaged by the time the remainder of the Roman fleet left port. Then, the armies of ships formed a line of battle and let loose the fearsome corvée. After the fight, 8 Carthaginian ships sank and 10 were taken, while the others went back to the Lipari Islands. The Romans were able to change even after making blunders at first. They used to be new to the sea, but now they were as good as Carthage, the best shipbuilders in the Mediterranean. The Senate's faith grew. They decided to take a big risk and build a huge invading fleet that would bring war to the heart of Carthage in Africa. By the summer of 256 before Christ, Rome had gathered 330 quinqueremes at Messana, along with ships to carry men, animals, and supplies. With almost 140,000 soldiers on board, it was the biggest fleet Rome had ever sent out, bigger than anything before. The fleet sailed south beyond Cape Pacanus, and then turned west towards Cape Ecnomus. This is where legions were supposed to board for the attack. But Carthage had been keeping an eye on things. They set out from their base at Panormus with an even bigger fleet, 350 ships and 150,000 sailors. The Roman consuls Marcus Atilius Regulus and Lucius Manlius made a tight wedge formation since they knew their ships were slower and less maneuverable. Heavy hexaremes led the way, squadrons followed on the sides, while transports were protected in the back. The Triarii, a last line of ships behind them, closed the formation tightly. Hamilcar and Hanno, the Carthaginian chiefs, got their men ready for battle in Heraclea, saying that the fight would settle everything. Winning could mean getting back Sicily, but losing could be bad for Carthage itself. Their fleet raced eastward, determined to crush Rome before the invasion could begin. Carthage got ready to surround the fleets with a huge wall. 3/4 of their ships made a long queue with their bows facing the Romans. Hanno sent his southern wing out to sea, while Hamilcar orientated his northern squadron towards the coast, both poised to shut in like pincers. The Roman consuls Regulus and Manlius looked at the opposing line, which was very thin. They thought they could break through the middle, so they told their forward squadrons to charge. The Carthaginians gave up some ground to get the Romans to come out even more. The eager pursuit stretched the formation thin, putting the transports and rear squadrons in a very vulnerable position. When Hamilcar gave the signal, the Carthaginian line suddenly turned around and charged back at their pursuers. The sea went crazy. Carthaginian crews moved with dexterity, slamming Roman hulls and then darting away to hit them again. Their speed and sailing skills made the heavy, slower Roman ships look like they were going to sink. But the Romans gave their answer. The corvi smashed down, holding the ships together. Marines ran across and turned the sea battle into a nasty fight between soldiers. Roman discipline started to show. Consuls Regulus and Manlius led by example, charging enemy decks and pushing their soldiers forward, slowly changing the tide of battle in Rome's favor. Hanno's squadron fought the Roman Triarii and started to win. At the same time, the northern wing of the Carthaginian army pushed the third Roman squadron hard, making it move towards the coast. Roman ships that had been cut loose from their tows drifted helplessly in the middle of 3 different naval engagements. The consular squadrons met Hamilcar head-on in the middle. At first, the fighting was even, but the Romans won because they had more heavy troops. Their marines assaulted the decks of the Carthaginian ships, pushing the enemy back. Hamilcar ordered a retreat to the west when he saw that his position was crumbling. This freed up Roman squadrons to help in other places. 63. Regulus and his squadron headed north to help the Triarii who were fighting. He changed the conflict by attacking Hanno's troops from behind. The Roman spirits rose, and the Triarii moved forward. Hanno narrowly made it to open sea after being stuck between 2 lines. The only thing left was the Carthaginian squadron on the coast, 64. That last division had pushed the Romans towards the shore, but they did not try to ram them because they were afraid of the lethal corvi. Regulus and Manlius moved in from 2 different directions, making a perfect circle around the enemy. The Carthaginians were defeated. They lost 50 ships, many more were sunk, and only a few got away. 65. The Battle of Cape Ecnomus, the biggest naval battle in history, came to an end. There were around 700 ships and 300,000 troops involved. Rome lost 24 ships, and Carthage lost approximately 1/3 of its navy. Now, it was possible for North Africa to be invaded. Regulus and his squadron headed north to help the Triarii who were fighting. He changed the conflict by attacking Hanno's troops from behind. The Roman spirits rose, and the Triarii moved forward. Hanno narrowly made it to open sea after being stuck between 2 lines. The only thing left was the Carthaginian squadron on the coast. That last division had pushed the Romans towards the shore, but they did not try to ram them because they were afraid of the lethal corvée. Regulus and Manlius moved in from two different directions, making a perfect circle around the enemy. The Carthaginians were defeated. They lost 50 ships, many more were sunk, and only a few got away. The Battle of Cape Ecnomus, the biggest naval battle in history, came to an end. There were around 700 ships and 300,000 troops involved. Rome lost 24 ships, and Carthage lost approximately a third of its navy. Now, it was possible for North Africa to be invaded. The Roman navy traversed the Mediterranean without any problems and landed at Cape Hermaeum on the Bay of Carthage. The legions then moved south and took the city of Aspis after a short siege. Instead of going straight to Carthage, they looted the rich countryside, taking 20,000 people as slaves and driving away herds of livestock. The Senate decided to break up command after the huge amount of money captured at Aspis. Lucius Manlius was told to take the prisoners and loot back to Rome, while Marcus Atilius Regulus stayed in Africa. He got ready to lead the campaign farther into enemy territory with 40 ships, 15,000 troops, and 500 cavalry. After Manlius took the trophies of war back to Carthage, they fought back. Generals Hamilcar, Hasdrubal, and Boestar put together 5,000 foot soldiers and 500 horsemen to fight Regulus. But the Roman consul took the lead. He marched east from Aspis and laid siege to the city of Adis, which the Carthaginian army was the same size as the Roman army, but it had two big advantages: fast cavalry and war elephants. On open land, these may have killed the Romans, but their leaders made a mistake by putting their troops on a rocky hill where neither elephants nor horsemen could move around. Regulus saw what they had done wrong right away. At daybreak, Regulus moved forward in two columns, climbing the slope from both sides. Carthaginian mercenaries charged down the slope, sending one column back in disarray. But they stretched their line too thin by pushing the chase too far. The second Roman column hit from behind, sending the mercenaries running and changing the course of the conflict. The Romans kept going higher, and the mood in the Carthaginian camp fell apart. The generals told everyone to leave. Cavalry and elephants carefully came down to the plain and ran away, followed by infantry. The soldiers in Regulus's army chased for a short while before resorting to looting. They took over the enemy camp and the area around Adis. Adis and the communities surrounding gave up fast once the area was calm. Regulus set his shop at Tunis, which was only a short march from Carthage itself. From this point, he could directly threaten the capital. But the consul also understood that his leadership was coming to an end and pushed for quick glory. Carthage was in a bad place. The military disaster was made worse by attacks by tribes in Numidia to the west. Refugees congregated inside the walls of the city, and disease and hunger spread without control. Morale dropped, and the once great city seemed ready to fall apart under the weight of Roman pressure and its own misery. Regulus was known for being brave, yet he did not march straight to Carthage. Instead, he proposed terms for peace in the early spring of 255. His demands were too much. Carthage had to give up her fleet,
surrender your fleet,
give up Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and pay such a huge tribute. The Senate of Carthage was quite angry. Polybius said that the conditions were disgusting and not worthy of their heritage. If they agreed, they would have to give up their empire. They chose to keep fighting instead. But boldness alone was not enough. What had brought Carthage down so far was not weak weapons, but weak leaders. Carthage relied on mercenaries a lot more than Rome's citizen legions did. Around this period, recruiters searched the Mediterranean for competent fighters. One among the people who were brought back was a Spartan leader named Xanthippus. He was a disciplined and experienced soldier who swiftly spotted what others had overlooked in the Punic War. The Roman consuls Regulus and Manlius looked at the opposing line, which was very thin. They thought they could break through the middle, so they told their forward squadrons to charge. The Carthaginians gave up some ground to get the Romans to come out even more. The eager pursuit stretched the formation thin, putting the transports and rear squadrons in a very... The Senate paid close attention. They trusted the Spartan because he was so clear. Xanthippus trained soldiers and boosted morale throughout the city. Carthage now had both the determination to fight and a leader who could see how to use elephants and cavalry as powerful weapons against Rome. Xanthippus took a new Carthaginian army into battle. It had 100 elephants, 4,000 cavalry, and 12,000 infantry, plus 5,000 citizen militia. He put his troops in order on the plains between Tunis and the Bagradas River, with elephants in front, infantry behind, and cavalry on the sides. Regulus agreed to fight with 15,000 legionaries and 500 cavalry. He made his infantry lines deeper so they could stand up to the elephants. He put velites in front and maniples of hastati, principes, and triarii behind them. His cavalry broke up into two groups, but they were fatally outnumbered by Carthage's better horsemen. The elephants moved forward under Xanthippus's order. Roman light troops and infantry charged to meet them, and there was a loud collision of iron and flesh. The Carthaginian cavalry pushed the Roman equites off the pitch on the wings. The Roman left wing briefly broke through mercenaries, but it was only a small victory. Elephants ripped holes in the Roman lines in the middle. Legionaries were trampled in piles, and their ranks were thrown into disarray. Soon, the Carthaginian cavalry that had come back attacked the sides, enclosing the principes and triarii. Some Romans broke through the elephants, but they were met by Xanthippus's disciplined phalanx, which kept the fight ended in disaster. 13,000 Romans were slain, and Consul Regulus and the rest of his garrison were taken prisoner. Only 2,000 people made it out alive and fled to Aspis. The Carthaginians lost very few men, about 800. It was a clear victory that showed how smart Xanthippus was at strategy. But the Spartan leader left soon after, worried that the Carthaginian generals would be jealous. The Punic army kept going and surrounded Aspis to kill the last Romans. The Senate in Rome quickly built a new fleet to save them. Carthage sent back the same thing, 200 warships to guard the coast of Africa. The fight happened off the coast of Cape Hermaeum. The fleets of Rome and Carthage saw each other and were both ready to conclude the fight for the people who survived in Tunis. The sea, which had already seen the biggest war in history, was about to see another deadly fight in the First Punic War. The Carthaginian fleet got closer, but they were shocked to see that the Roman fleet was huge. It included 350 quinqueremes led by consuls Marcus Aemilius and Servius Fulvius, plus 40 more from Aspis. The Carthaginians were surrounded and pushed towards the shore, where the feared corvi changed the sea warfare into a fight amongst. The Romans took 114 enemy ships and sunk 16 of them, making their fleet huge. They picked up the survivors at Aspis, along with war trophies, and then sailed to Sicily. But victory at sea did not last long. A severe storm off Camarina destroyed almost all of the fleet, leaving barely 80 ships. Polybius said it was one of the worst maritime catastrophes ever.
Became a graveyard for
the Sicilian shoreline was covered in bodies and wreckage.
The consuls had refused.
The consuls were told by pilots not to sail when Orion and the Dog Star rose, but they did not listen. Carthage, happy to hear about the calamity, got ready to fight back with much more strength. General Hasdrubal landed in Sicily with an army that included 140 elephants. At the same time, Carthage assembled a second fleet of 200 warships. Hasdrubal trained his forces for open field conflict, where cavalry and elephants could win, since he wanted to change the course of the Punic War on the island. The storm destroyed Rome, but it would not give up. The Senate told the builders to make 220 new ships in just 3 months. In 254 before Christ, consuls Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio and Aulus Attilius took command of a new fleet of 300 ships to resume the war in Sicily. Their goal was Panormus, the island's strongest castle in Carthage. The Romans surrounded the city on 2 sides. A huge battering ram broke down a tower on the coast, making a hole. The new town fell quickly, and the people of the old town, who were already feeling down, gave up. The Romans had control of Panormus. Scipio and Attilius left a garrison to guard their booty and went back to Rome in victory. Carthage's grip on Sicily became even weaker, while Rome proved how strong it was. Even after a calamity, the Republic recovered, fought back, and moved forward in the First Punic War. In the summer of 253 before Christ, the consuls Gnaeus Servilius and Gaius Sempronius went on a second mission to Africa. They did not fight directly like Regulus did before. Instead, they raided coastal towns, but luck was not on their side. Their ships came aground in the shallow waters of the Lesser Sirte. The consuls sailed home feeling bad about their failure, but the sea was more dangerous than Carthage. More than 150 ships were destroyed by a strong storm in the Tyrrhenian Sea. The weather had devastated Rome's navy, which had formerly been a symbol of obstinate strength. Sailors and marines were lost in huge numbers. Carthage lost 130 ships to Roman cleverness at Cape Ecnomus in the early years of the naval conflict. But storms had sunk 534 Roman ships in just 2 years. Polybius thought that more than 200,000 men had died, which rocked the Romans' faith and their wallets. The Senate of Rome decided not to build up its navy after such a big setback. The balance of power went back to Carthage, which was once again the lord of the seas. Rome had no alternative but to continue the fight on Sicilian territory, where elephants and foot soldiers would decide the island's fate. In 251, consuls Lucius Caecilius Metellus and Gaius Furius entered the Straits of Messana with only 60 ships, which were the sad remains of their previous navy. Their armies moved into western Sicily, but they stayed away from broad fields because they were afraid of the 140 elephants that Carthage had sent to the island. Their campaign was careful.
Himera fell.
After a short siege, they took Himera, but they did not make any big pushes against Carthaginian fortresses. Instead, they stayed in the mountains and only went to Lilybaeum and Thermae to fight.
Falls.
But they always turned back. Roman strategy was
unbroken.
significantly influenced by the fear. Eventually, Consul Furius and some of the soldiers were sent back to Italy. His co-worker Metellus stayed in Panormus, where Roman soldiers set up camp for the winter. The fight for Sicily went on, but neither side was able to deal the last blow that would conclude the First Punic War. When one consul, Gaius Furius, went back to Italy in 251 before Christ, Rome's presence in Sicily got weaker. Carthaginian general Hasdrubal took advantage of the situation and brought his elephants and army to the walls of Panormus, where he hoped to defeat consul Caecilius Metellus in open battle. Metellus, on the other hand, would not go out onto the plains. Instead, he stayed behind Panormus's defenses and watched Hasdrubal destroy the countryside. Metellus put his plan into action as the Carthaginians crossed the Parapus River and were close to the city. Roman skirmishers came out to bother the elephants and get them to come closer. As the animals moved forward, hiding velites threw javelins at them and then jumped into trenches to get more. When the elephants got too close to the fortifications, they were hit by volleys of arrows and pila. They turned back, trampling through the Carthaginian lines and sowing havoc among their own troops. That was when Metellus let loose his heavy infantry. New maniples came out of the gates and hit the adversary, who was already in chaos. The Carthaginian line fell apart because of the stampeding elephants and the disciplined Roman attack. Hasdrubal's army fell apart, and Rome took a lot of live animals as battle trophies. Rome was buzzing with excitement after the win at Panormus. The idea that elephants could not be hurt was proven wrong, and morale went up. The Senate, feeling good about themselves, ordered the construction of another fleet of 200 ships. They wanted to attack Carthage's final strongholds in Sicily and get ready for another audacious invasion of Africa. In 250, new consuls Caecilius Regulus and Manius Vulso sailed with supplies and troops to help. Their ship joined the legions that were attacking Lilybaeum, Carthage's main base in the west. Rome pushed its blockade by land and water. Carthage knew that Lilybaeum, Eryx, and Drepanum were its last Sicilian lands, so it got ready for a last-ditch effort. Lilybaeum, Carthage's stronghold in Sicily, was well protected by 10,000 men, thick walls, and a deep trench. The Romans established two camps that were connected by trenches and stockades. They slowly knocked down towers near the coast. Even though they knocked down a lot of defenses, Commander Himilco quickly rebuilt them and sent out repeated attacks to burn siege engines. Disloyal mercenary officers in the garrison were plotting to betray the city, which was a threat from inside. Alexon the Achaean found out about the plan and told Himilco. They stopped the traitors by getting the troops to promise allegiance and rewards. Instead of getting help, the conspirators were pushed back by volleys of stones and arrows. Soon help came. Hannibal, another Carthaginian general who was not related to the renowned Barca, went into Lilybaeum with 50 ships and 10,000 men. The Romans could not stop him, maybe because the winds were too powerful. His arrival raised morale, and Himilco attempted a massive sortie, but despite heavy combat, the Romans maintained their positions. The fight was quite hard. Siege fortifications were on fire, and fighting was going on hand to hand. But Roman discipline held. Carthaginian losses kept rising until Himilco called for a retreat. The siege went on for a long time. Later, Hannibal snuck out of Lilybaeum and brought troops to Drepanum. The castle was still under assault, but had enough supplies. Another Hannibal, the Rhodian, offered to test the blockade with his own fast ship back in Carthage. He dashed past Roman soldiers to bring news and supplies to Lilybaeum. The consuls were angry over the failure, so they set up an ambush by putting their 10 quickest ships near the harbor's departure to catch the audacious blockade runner. Hannibal the Rhodian got away from the Romans again, but his luck ran out shortly after. The consuls took a Carthaginian ship that was stuck, filled it with their fastest oarsmen, and created a trap. Their ship chased and caught up with Hannibal as he came out again. Roman marines boarded in large numbers and took both the ship and the people on it. The capture of the brave blockade runner was a turning point. His fast ship became Rome's own prize, and they utilized it to catch others who were trying to break the blockade. But Himilco still fought back within Lilybaeum. He worked hard to rebuild the defenses, and soon nature helped him when a strong windstorm hit the Roman siege works. Greek mercenaries took advantage of the situation. They broke off into 3 groups and threw firebrands at the Roman fortifications. The wind blew the flames, turning wooden buildings into huge fires. Legionaries fought through smoke and heat, but the damage was done. Weeks of work were gone in a single day of storm and fire. Greek mercenaries took advantage of the situation. They broke off into 3 groups and threw firebrands at the Roman fortifications. The wind blew the flames, turning wooden buildings into huge fires. Legionaries fought through smoke and heat, but the damage was done. Weeks of work were gone in a single day of storm and fire. Claudius was brave but not very careful. Instead of slowly choking Lilybaeum, he turned his strength against Drepanum, which was nearby. At midnight, 123 Roman ships left camp to surprise the harbor. At morning, Adherbal, the Carthaginian commander, hastily got his soldiers ready to meet them at sea. The Roman fleet was split up. Some ships were inside the harbor, others were near the mouth of the harbor, and some were still outside. Claudius told them to regroup, but in the haste, the squadrons ran into each other. Oars broke, and the forms fell apart into pandemonium. Adherbal's fleet, on the other hand, moved out in perfect order, outflanking the Romans and forcing them to the shore. Adherbal lined up his ships in a long queue next to the coast and then told them to charge. The Carthaginian rams hit the Roman hulls, and the Punic marines stormed other ships. The Roman navy was in a state of panic. Claudius Pulcher got away with only 30 ships. The rest were sunk or taken. Drepana was Rome's worst naval setback so far, but the Senate did not give up. They put together 60 new warships and 800 transport ships full with supplies for Lilybaeum. After getting more protection in Messana and Syracuse, the convoy continued on its way, staying close to Sicily's southern coast as it made its way to the Roman camp. In the meantime, Adherbal sent his second-in-command, Carthalo, with 100 ships to help Himilco at Lilybaeum. Carthalo struck without warning, setting fire to and taking Roman ships that were anchored off the coast. At the same time, Himilco sent out a sortie, which made things even more confusing. Carthalo towed his... Soon Carthalo saw another Roman fleet, the relief convoy sailing from Syracuse. But Roman scouts had warned them about the trap. They anchored near to shore and let soldiers off who directed catapults and ballistae at the sea. Carthalo's ships were hit by a lot of missiles, so he had to pull back with only a few captured transports. Carthalo ran into 2 Roman squadrons while sailing east towards Cape Cochinus. The Romans did not want to fight because they were afraid of the rocky coast, but Carthalo's experienced sailors knew the symptoms of a storm coming. He told them to go back and leave the sea to the gods. The storm hit soon after and destroyed the Roman fleet. The storm near Cape Cochinus was the third big naval tragedy for Rome. The Republic was shaken and stopped doing most of its sea operations. Instead, it went back to Sicily. In 248, Consul Lucius Junius marched from Syracuse to Lilybaeum, tightening the noose. He assaulted the mountain village of Eryx to find an easier target, and took the famous temple of Aphrodite. By the 16th year of the First Punic War, both Rome and Carthage were hurting. Hundreds of thousands had died, but neither side would give up. The rise of Hamilcar Barca, the first major character in a dynasty that would haunt Rome for years, marked the start of a new chapter in the fight. Hamilcar hit hard. His navy attacked the Italian mainland, stealing from Calabria and Campania. He took over Ercht, a castle on cliffs near Panormus in Sicily. From this stronghold, he attacked Roman supply lines, ambushed groups of people looking for food, and raided Roman territory and the sea. The Romans set up camp near Erchta, but Hamilcar would not fight them. Instead, he fought a war of movement, attacking and fleeing when he wanted to. Polybius said that the years that followed were like a never-ending boxing fight, with Rome and Carthage throwing blows, feints, and counters in a stalemate that never ended. After 3 years of losses, Hamilcar got worse. He marched from Erchta and took up a position at Mount Eryx, cutting off the Roman garrison on the mountain's heights. For 2 years, the legions fought off attacks and skirmishes while the Carthaginian troops stayed in place, leaving both sides exhausted in a grim stalemate. The conflict had been going on for more than 20 years by this time. Costs rose, and naval battles became less common, leaving the fight in Sicily to go on. The Republic would not give up even though Rome's coffers were depleted. Rich people paid for the building of 200 new quinqueremes, which was a last-ditch effort to break the deadlock. In 242 before Christ, Consul Gaius Lutatius Catulus took over the rebuilt navy of Rome. He blocked off Lilybaeum and Drepanum and made his sailors and marines work hard. Catulus realized that the only way to end the war was with a decisive naval battle that would destroy Carthage's last chance of getting supplies to its forces in Sicily. Carthage had not taken care of its fleet for years, but news of Rome's return made them act. A new navy set sail under Hanno in 241 to bring supplies to Hamilcar Barca's forces. The strategy was easy. Get to Eryx, give the army more supplies, and then take Hamilcar on board for one last attack against the Roman. Hanno anchored to the Aegates Islands without knowing that Rome was waiting. Catulus, who had been alerted, sailed his fleet to block the way. The Carthaginians came close on the morning of March 10th with the wind at their backs. But as the seas got rough, Catulus put everything on the line and told his soldiers to go into the storm. The Roman quincurames, which were manned by tough legionaries, were faster and steadier. Their rams broke through Punic hulls, while boarding bridges kept ships together for devastating close combat. The combat was one-sided. 50 Carthaginian ships were sunk, 70 more were seized, and their crews were taken prisoner. The remainder ran away with the wind to safety. Carthage could not send Hamilcar more supplies after they lost, since he was stuck in Sicily. A message gave him the choice to keep fighting or not. He tried to make peace with Catulus since he knew that fighting back would be useless.
The options
Rome,
were clear.
tired from fighting for decades, also wanted peace, and talks quickly began. The First Punic War, which lasted the longest and was the bloodiest war of its time, came to an end. Polybius thought that 1 million people died in wars, storms, diseases, and famines. Rome became the master of Sicily and the controller of the seas, while Carthage suffered shame but not a loss of spirit. There were still more hard times ahead. The initial draft of the peace pact made Carthage leave Sicily, let all Roman prisoners go, and promise not to attack Syracuse or its allies. They also promised to pay 2,200 talents of silver, which is around 70 metric tons, over the course of 20 years. But the Roman assembly stepped in and made the terms worse. The eventual settlement required Carthage to pay 3,200 talents in under 10 years, which was a huge load. Even though peace had been signed, it did not help. The First Punic War was over, but its effects led to an even worse fight. The mercenaries of Carthage turned against their own country. Hamilcar told his mercenaries to go home to Africa after the deal. General Gisco made plans for their transportation in tiny groups and told the Senate to pay and send each group home when they arrived. Instead, the Senate put everything on hold, expecting to lower pay and alleviate tensions by having the soldiers stay in Carthage for a few days. The plan went horribly wrong. Mercenaries who were angry and not getting paid rioted in the city, stealing and causing trouble. The Senate told them to go to the nearby town of Sicca, but things got worse there. They still were not getting paid, and discipline completely broke down among the battle-hardened veterans of Rome. When the talks broke down, the mercenaries chose their own leaders: Mathos, a Libyan, and Spendius, a Campanian. They got 20,000 men to join the open insurrection. They set up camp right south of Carthage after marching on Tunis. The First Punic War was concluded, but the mercenary war, which was a bad thing for Rome, had begun. Mathos sent messengers all over Libya to spread the insurrection. 70,000 additional men joined the rebels after he called for them. He sent forces from Tunis to besiege Utica and Hippodioritis, cutting off Carthage itself. The city turned to General Hanno, who quickly raised militias and new mercenaries to protect the state. Hanno did well at first, commanding elephants against the rebels at Utica. The charge burst through the enemy's lines and sent them running up the hills. But his troops got sloppy and started stealing instead of chasing. The rebels regrouped, attacked again, and defeated his army. Not long after that, Hanno failed again to take down a rebel camp. The Senate was so angry with Hanno's incompetence that they took him out of power and gave it to Hamilcar Barca. He went into battle with 70 elephants, 10,000 loyal soldiers, and even some rebels who had switched sides. He had to cross the Bagradas River to break the siege of Utica, but there were 10,000 rebels on the only bridge. Hamilcar looked at the river quite closely. He said that in some gusts, silt made a shallow passage. He took advantage of the situation and led his army across at night, catching Mathos's forces off guard at dawn. The rebels were thrown into chaos and terror as Hamilcar attacked them from behind. Spendius, the commander of the rebels, quickly sent 15,000 troops to help Mathos. Hamilcar moved forward with elephants and cavalry in front, and troops behind to face 25,000 rebels. He suddenly turned to the side, pretending to run away. The rebels charged without thinking, only to run into a Roman-style phalanx that was ready for them and cut them down in groups. Hamilcar gave the word for the elephants and cavalry to turn around and hit the rebels from the sides and back. The Carthaginians took over the insurgents' camp near the Bagradas, killing 6,000 of them and capturing 2,000 more. Survivors fled to Tunis, and Hamilcar showed himself to be the Republic's savior and lord of the battlefield. After saving Utica, Hamilcar went after Hippo Diaritus, but Mathos and Spendius got back together, this time with Numidian friends and 2,000 Gaulish mercenaries led by Autaritus. Hamilcar's army was soon surrounded by Libyans in front of him, Numidians behind him, and Gauls attacking from the side. It looked like Carthage was about to go under. Then luck stepped in. Naravas, a prince from Numidia, liked Hamilcar and left with 2,000 elite cavalry. Hamilcar made the alliance official by pledging to marry his daughter. He fought back ferociously with new strength. Elephants broke through the rebel lines, Numidian riders attacked their sides, and 10,000 rebels were killed, and 4,000 more were taken prisoner. At the same time, problems extended to other countries. In Sardinia, mercenaries turned on their leaders and killed generals Bostar and Hanno. For a while, the rebels were in charge of the island until the people there fought back. In Africa, Hamilcar's progress slowed down when both Utica and Hippo Diaritus turned on him and joined the rebels anew. Hamilcar went back to guerrilla tactics when he was trapped, hitting supply lines with quick cavalry raids.
238 BC.
Then, in 238, things became better for him. Rome let go of Punic captives of war because it wanted peace. Thousands of people joined Hamilcar's army again, making it stronger. He used elephants and cavalry to lure rebels back to the plains where he had the upper hand. One by one, the rebel groups were defeated. Fear confined them in their main camp, where they were so hungry that they turned to cannibalism. Their leaders, Spendius, Autaritus, and others, were so desperate that they agreed to talk to Hamilcar, but he took them hostage. Without a leader, the rebel force acted without thinking. The mercenaries rushed out of camp in a panic, hoping to save their leaders. Hamilcar hit right away. His troops surrounded the crowd, and elephants stomped forward as cavalry tightened the trap. Polybius says that 40,000 rebels were killed in the defeat. This was the worst blow of the truceless war so far. Tunis was the last stronghold of the rebels. Hamilcar was in charge of the southern siege lines, and Hannibal was in charge of the northern ones. Hannibal tortured and crucified Spendius and other prisoners in front of the fortifications to scare the rebels. Mathos stormed off in a rage, took over Hannibal's camp, and nailed him on the same cross. Hamilcar moved his camp to the Bagradas River after this terrible talk. The Carthaginian Senate, following Rome's example, created a new militia of people and sent 30 senators to join him. Mathos soon consented to start the fight. Not much is known about the fight except that the insurgents were killed. They massacred tens of thousands of Libyan mercenaries and caught Mathos. The mercenary war came to a conclusion quickly when Utica and Hippodiaritus succumbed. Hamilcar Barca won because his talent and tenacity had preserved Carthage. But the state was devastated. Its coffers had been drained by years of conflict, rebellion. Rebel mercenaries briefly took over in Sardinia, but people kicked them out. Rome took advantage of the situation and took over the island. Rome asked for additional 1,200 talents of silver when Carthage protested, threatening to start the war again. Carthage was weak and embarrassed, so it had no choice but to give in to the harsh demand. Hamilcar's popularity helped him get ahead in politics, even though his adversaries blamed him for Carthage's problems. He was sure that Rome would always be his enemy, so he started getting ready for the next fight that was sure to come. He went to Iberia, which was wealthy in silver and gold, to help him rebuild Carthage's might. Hamilcar left for Spain in 238 before Christ. He made a sacrifice to Baal and called for his small child before he left. The child put his hand on the altar and promised never to be friends with Rome. Hannibal Barca was his name, and his oath would one day rock the Republic to its core.